Hey there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana. I'm also the owner of Velvet Bride, which is a wedding dress store here in Missoula, Montana. And I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. So today we're going to talk about some tips for using the same location, the same space for both your ceremony and your reception, and how to achieve this as efficiently and flawlessly as possible. So when you're using the same location for your ceremony and your reception space, then what happens in between when you're turning your ceremony space into the reception space is called a flip. So you might see this term somewhere in your planning process or from your venue staff. And so a flip just refers to flipping the space from being set up for a ceremony into being set up for tables and chairs for your reception space for your guests. Maybe this is the plan from the start. You only have this one location that you are planning to use for both ceremony and reception, or maybe this flip occurs because it is your backup weather plan and you are having to move your ceremony inside, and maybe that wasn't the main plan, but that has become your plan. So if that's even a possibility for you, then I highly recommend paying attention to this video and following along with these tips. So whether it was your intention or not, if you're having your ceremony in the same space as your reception, there are a few things that you want to make sure that you are doing and preparing for ahead of time. First one is to make sure that you have a solid layout floor plan and make this digitized if possible. There are online programs, a lot of them now, like through Zola and the Knot, have these if you're using one for your wedding website or for your RSVPs, but All Seated is one that I use quite a bit, and you can often upload the layout from your specific venue and they might already have the layout and dimension uploaded into All Seated. Otherwise, you can input the dimensions of whatever space you're using and be able to create a to-scale layout floor plan. I highly recommend this to make sure that you are really planning exactly what's going to go into the space for both your ceremony and your reception. So you want to have a digitized, planned out layout for both of these spaces. That way you have printed copies that you can provide to anybody that is going to be assisting with this flip, so that everyone knows what it's going to start with and what it's going to end up like, and exactly what's going to be in that space as far as number of tables, where those tables are going to be, as well as the number of chairs at each table. So that's the first thing, is to make sure that you have an actual scheduled, planned out layout for both ceremony and reception. And typically I recommend, if you're using the same space, to use the same chairs for your ceremony and reception. That way you're not having double the amount of items that you need to move. You can just have your chairs set up for your ceremony, and then when it comes time to move tables in, you're just moving those same chairs into their location at the tables. That way you're not having to move so many things out and move so many things in. Now, on the topic of tables and chairs, you have a couple options when it comes to prepping for your flip. You can either have your tables set or mostly set already and just kind of put in a location that isn't going to be in the way of your ceremony, or you have the option to completely set all of the tables after the ceremony, before the reception, during that cocktail hour space. I really only recommend fully setting the tables and doing that entire flip during cocktail hour if you have a big team helping, and if that is primarily professional. So if your venue staff is going to be largely executing this flip, then you can get away with fully setting the tables just during cocktail hour. If this is a more DIY situation and you plan on just having family members assist, or even your wedding coordinator, it's going to require a lot of manpower to be able to do a full flip from start to finish and fully set up your tables, because you're going to have to roll the tables out, set them up, put a linen on, put your place settings on, put your centerpieces on. This is typically things that we take several hours to do in the day when you're setting up a full space. So to have to minimize that to just a very short period of time, not to mention all the bodies that are going to be in the room and kind of circling around, is just not going to set yourself up for success. So if you don't have a designated staff doing this for you, then I recommend having your tables set or mostly set and be able to have them off in some sort of space. Now, this obviously works better the larger your venue is. So if you have a larger venue, you can have your ceremony set up and the table set up off to the side where it isn't encroaching on the space, isn't super distracting, then I highly recommend going this route. Again, if you are planning on having your tables fully set during cocktail hour, just make sure you have a full team and that you are going over each detail ahead of time and exactly what needs to be set. And this is again where that printed layout is going to be absolutely necessary. On the topic of the printed layout again, you want to make sure that you are also labeling each table with what is going to go on it. So if you are choosing to not set all of your tables or maybe have it partially set, maybe just your centerpieces on it, and then you're going to set your place settings and your chairs around it afterwards. Even if they are fully set and you're only setting chairs, it's helpful to label your tables with like a sticky note or something to just show what's going to go on the table so that it can make this as quick and efficient as possible. So for example, table 6 is going to have 8 chairs, 1 centerpiece, and 8 table settings. And just put that on a sticky note, stick it on the table, and you know what's gonna go on that table, and then you just move it into its location and put the items on top. That way you're not having to constantly refer to just one singular piece of paper, especially when you have multiple people that are going to be tackling this activity. So label as clearly as possible, if not just for the amount of chairs that are going to go at that table. Next, if you are planning on fully setting your tables during that cocktail hour time in between your ceremony and reception, where are those items and those tables going to be stored? So if this is something in your mind where you really want to have the look of just having a ceremony set up and not have tables set off to the sides that guests can see and just have that turn completely from ceremony into reception space, where is everything going to be stored that's going to go on these tables? You need to make sure that that is going to be an option for you to do and be able to have the space that you could easily access all of the place settings, the glassware, flatware, centerpieces, all those things as organized as possible so that you can quickly get to those items and be able to set up your tables. So if your venue has a storage room or a kitchen or something like that, that you can store those items where they're going to be out of sight from your guests during the ceremony, but easily accessible, then this is going to be key. Another tip is to make sure that you have a place for your guests to go during this flip time. So if you're having a ceremony and reception in the same space, your cocktail hour should ideally be somewhere else. It's going to be infinitely more difficult to be flipping this space when you have a bunch of people in the way or in the same room, and it's going to be a lot harder to maneuver around people. You also don't want them to have the feeling that they're in the way or feel like they're kind of seeing something they're not supposed to see, like the magic is gone from turning your ceremony space into your reception space. So if you have another room, if you have an outdoor area, make sure that you are planning to have your cocktail hour and kind of push all of your guests to a different space so that you can be able to flip this space much more efficiently. And finally, keep your settings as simple and streamlined as possible. So if you are doing a flip, whether you're going to have your tables fully set or not, you want to keep this as simple as possible. And that doesn't mean it has to be completely bare, but rather than doing like a bud vase style where you're going to have multiple arrangements per table, have just one centerpiece that's going to go in the middle. And it's going to make things a lot more efficient when it comes to setting those tables and also when it comes to moving them. Because whether you have them set up prior, you're going to need to move these tables still to their final destination, or if you're going to be setting them up from start to finish, that's just less items that have to be individually placed, which means less time overall that is needed to set up these tables. So keep it as simple and streamlined as possible. Having to do a room flip is not the end of the world. If this is going to be your rain plan, try not to stress too much about it. Just make sure that you have an efficient and thorough plan in place as well as the crew to back it up in order to effectively achieve a room flip. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we'll see you next week.